That's why everything stopped. Clara swallowed hard, and the crates, Shaw smiled faintly. Let's just say they contained more than film. Her grip tightened on the door frame. You expect me to believe you? You could have found those photos anywhere. He sighed, pocketing the coin. I don't expect belief, only cooperation. Which means what, exactly? Let me inspect the theater, he said. That's all. I'll handle the risk. You'll be compensated. Substantially. She stared at him, measuring the calm in his tone against the chill crawling up her neck. And if I say no, then I imagine we'll meet again under less pleasant circumstances. The words hung in the air, not shouted, not angry, but final. Clara slowly closed the door until only a sliver of his face remained visible. His expression never changed. Think about it, he murmured. The truth buried here is heavier than you realize. The door clicked shut. She turned the deadbolt, then stood still, staring at his fading reflection in the glass as he walked away into the fog. For several minutes she didn't move. The stillness inside the theater pressed around her, heavy and suffocating. She could almost feel the weight of that coin still lingering in the air, that sunburst emblem, glinting with the kind of truth that ruins people. When she finally went back upstairs, the photographs lay scattered across the floor, as though stirred by an unseen hand. She knelt, gathering them, but one had fallen face down. When she flipped it over, her breath stopped. Across the back, written in faint, smeared pencil, were 4 words she hadn't noticed before. Behind the light, safe. She stared at them, her heart pounding, the message shaking in her hands. Behind the light. Her gaze lifted to the projector, the same lens that had revealed Rain's secret. Slowly, she approached it, tracing the edge of the metal casing. Her fingertips brushed against a small latch she'd never seen before. She pulled it open. Inside was a hollow compartment, empty except for a thin, crumpled piece of film no larger than her palm. She held it to the light. The image was faint, almost erased, but she could make out a single frame. Jonathan Rains, standing beside one of the crates. Holding a ledger, a second man stood beside him, Leland Shaw. The breath fled her lungs. The edges of the room blurred, reality bending around disbelief. The photo was old, too old. Shaw hadn't aged a day. Her knees weakened, and the piece of film fluttered from her hands. Somewhere deep inside the theater, a door creaked open on its own. She turned slowly, staring into the darkness below, every instinct screaming that she wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time since she bought the liberty, Clara Reese truly understood she wasn't the one discovering the secret. The secret had found her. As the sound of footsteps echoed faintly through the hall, she whispered into the silence, "What are you?" The only answer was the faint flicker of the projector bulb, pulsing like a heartbeat, one that didn't belong to her. And in that dim, ghostly light, the past began to move again. Clara didn't leave the theater that day. She couldn't. The thought of what she'd just seen, that photograph, that impossible image of Leland Shaw standing beside Jonathan Rains in 1953, looped through her mind like a reel caught in its own frame. The air inside the Liberty felt denser, like the walls were holding their breath, waiting to see what she'd do next. Her hands trembled as she poured herself coffee from a thermos she'd brought earlier. The taste was bitter, metallic. She barely noticed. Every sound, every flicker of light drew her attention. Even the steady hum of the overhead bulb now felt alive, a frequency just low enough to rattle her nerves. She pulled the film frame closer, holding it up to the weak sunlight leaking through a cracked pane. The image refused to change. The same composition, the same calm expression on Shaw's face, as though he knew she'd one day find it. It wasn't possible, not physically, not humanly. The clock above the concession stand ticked softly, each second louder than the last. Behind the light safe, the message on the back of the photograph replayed in her mind like a command. But she'd already found the compartment behind the projector. It was empty, wasn't it? Her flashlight beam swept across the booth again, catching the silver dust that shimmered midair. She crouched beside the machine, running her fingers along every seam, every groove, and then, just below the base of the frame holder, her nail snagged on something, a second latch, smaller, nearly invisible. Her breath caught. She hesitated, fingers trembling over the metal edge. Then she pulled. A faint click echoed in the room. The bottom panel popped loose, revealing a small cavity lined with felt. Inside, wrapped in crumbling cloth, was a leather-bound ledger. Clara exhaled sharply, her pulse pounding in her ears. She lifted it carefully, brushing away the dust. The cover was embossed with the same emblem, the rising sunburst. The title, etched faintly in gold, read, Dawnlight Inventory. Her mouth went dry. She sat at the work table and began turning the brittle pages. Each one was numbered meticulously, written in Rain's hand, neat, calculated. Lists of dates, coded shipments, and strange designations, DL1, DL2, DL3. Next to each a weight, gold bars, silver ingots. Artifacts, dozens of entries, hundreds, but near the end, the handwriting changed. The letters grew frantic, jagged, as if written by a shaking hand. They're coming for it. I sealed the final vault. No one can be trusted. The light must never fall wrong, they'll see. Clara whispered the words aloud. The light must never fall wrong. What did that mean? She turned the next page. It was blank except for one single sentence scrawled diagonally across it. Sure knows. The sound of her own heartbeat was deafening. She slammed the book shut and stumbled back from the table. Her breath came in shallow bursts. The walls felt closer now, as if the building were leaning in to listen. Then a sound, not thunder, not wind, a phone ringing. She spun toward the noise. It came from the office downstairs, the old rotary phone she'd never plugged in, the one still hanging from the wall behind the ticket counter. The shrill tones sliced through the stillness, each ring pulling her closer. She moved down the staircase, her footsteps muffled against the carpet. When she reached the lobby, the ringing stopped. Silence. She stared at the phone, her reflection warped in its cracked surface. Her hand hovered over the receiver, hesitant. It rang again. She jumped. With trembling fingers, she lifted it. Hello. A pause, then that voice, calm, smooth, familiar. I told you not to rush, Shaw said. Curiosity never ends well. Her throat went dry. How are you calling this number? It's disconnected. Some lines, he said, almost amused, never die. She gripped the receiver tighter. What do you want? To help you? He said simply. You've found the ledger, good. But you don't understand what you're holding. That book isn't proof of fortune. It's evidence, and people would rather erase evidence than share it. Who are you? She snapped. You're in that photograph, from 1953. You haven't aged. Another pause, a slow exhale on the line. Clara, he said softly, her name like silk and smoke. Some men serve history, others endure it. The line went dead. The dial tone's low hum bled into the silence like a heartbeat. Clara lowered the receiver slowly, her body trembling from adrenaline. She felt suddenly exposed, as if eyes were on her from every dark corner of the theater. She ran her hand across her forehead, forcing herself to breathe. She needed to leave to think, but as she turned toward the exit, a soft metallic clang echoed from the projection booth above. Something or someone had moved. She grabbed her flashlight and started up the stairs, every muscle screaming for her to turn back. When she reached the booth, the first thing she noticed was the projector's light flickering again, though she hadn't turned it on. The beam wasn't steady. It pulsed irregular, alive. It pointed directly at the steel door, and then she saw it. The ledger lay open again, though she'd closed it. The pages fluttered on their own in the faint wind from the broken window, stopping on one near the center. A new message had appeared, written in ink still wet, glistening under the light. Don't open it until the light shows you the way. Her breath hitched. She stepped closer, reading it again, her voice barely a whisper. Until the light shows me. The projector flickered violently. For a moment, the beam hit the steel door at just the right angle and something happened. The sunburst emblem glowed faintly, as if reacting. Beneath it, fine lines appeared, hidden etchings forming a map, a shape, something precise and deliberate. She reached out, tracing the pattern. The metal was warm to the touch. Then, as quickly as it began, the glow faded. The light steadied. The door went cold. Clara stepped back, heart pounding, her hand trembling. She looked again at the ledger. The ink had already dried, proof that whatever force was moving through this place didn't obey time as she understood it. Outside, thunder rumbled again, closer this time. She sat on the edge of the stool, clutching the ledger to her chest. The storm rolled in like a warning, rain slashing the windows in sharp, rhythmic bursts. The Liberty Theatre was no longer just a decaying building. It was a vault, one that reacted to light, to motion, to memory itself. And now she had something that whoever they were would stop at. Nothing to reclaim. Her gaze drifted to the business card Shaw had left behind, its letters gleaming faintly where the projector's light caught it. She whispered, "If you knew Rains, what are you really?" A single bulb above her flickered once, then twice, and went dark. In the blackness she heard something faint but unmistakable, a man's quiet laugh echoing through the empty rows below. The sound wasn't coming from the booth. It was coming from the screen, and when she turned her flashlight toward it, she saw a single new image projected there, faint, ghostly, and impossibly real. Jonathan Rains, standing in the projector room, smiling, and behind him, the figure of Leland Shaw. The past and present had finally collided, and Clara Reese realized she was no longer watching history. She was inside it. As the storm raged outside, the Liberty's heart began to beat again, in light, in sound, in memory, and the door behind her hummed softly, waiting to be opened. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It fell in steady sheets, washing the town in gray, blurring streetlights in smeared halos of gold. Clara stayed inside the Liberty the entire time, sleeping little, eating less, and watching the projector light flicker like a restless pulse. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it, that image burned into her mind. Jonathan Rains and Leland Shaw, side by side, both staring at the camera as if they knew she would one day see them. The same calm eyes, the same sunburst emblem glinting faintly in the background. It didn't make sense, none of it did. But logic had stopped serving her days ago. She had read the ledger a dozen times now, each pass revealing something new, not because the words changed, but because she did. Between the coded lists and frantic scrawls, she began to understand Rain's descent. His notes shifted from organized inventories to unhinged confessions, mentions of the shipment, Dawnlight's promise, and the debt owed in gold and silence. There were sketches, too crude, mechanical drawings that looked like vault doors and projector components fused together. Some were marked with coordinates, others simply labeled Liberty. It was all connected. Rains, the theater, the gold, and Shaw. But the question wasn't how, it was why. The storm had knocked out power across town, but the Liberty's circuits still hummed, faintly alive. The generator downstairs, ancient and oil-fed, had sputtered awake that morning, unprovoked. She hadn't touched it. Now the building glowed with its own dim life, like a creature breathing through its walls. At noon, Clara sat in the projection booth surrounded by the artifacts of Rain's madness: photographs, pages, reels, the Dawnlight ledger. The air smelled of ozone and dust, the storm outside making the glass rattle in its frame. She opened her notebook, scribbling words as fast as her thoughts would form them. Jonathan Rains, 1949 to 1953, film producer turned smuggler, gold stolen during Reconstruction shipments, possible government link, Dawnlight, equals codename, Shaw present in 1953, photograph equals impossible, Immortal, manipulation, the pen tore the paper, her hands were shaking. She leaned back, pressing her palms against her temples. "You're unraveling, Clara," she whispered. "You need proof, facts." So she decided to go find them. The town's small historical society sat 2 blocks from City Hall, a squat brick building with a faded banner that read "Preserving Our Heritage." Inside, it smelled of mildew and patience. An elderly volunteer greeted her with a polite nod, recognizing her as the woman who'd bought the haunted theater. Clara forced a smile. "I'm researching the Liberty's former owner, Jonathan Rains." The woman's expression changed, not fear, exactly, but discomfort. "Oh, him? You knew him? Everyone did, or thought they did. He was a celebrity around here once. Big premieres, Hollywood visitors, newsmen. The Liberty put our town on the map. Then he vanished, just before the fire." "Fire?" The woman nodded. "A small one, they said. Electrical, but it closed the theater overnight. He disappeared the next morning. No obituary, no forwarding address, nothing." Clara felt the cold crawl up her arms. Was anyone hurt? The volunteer hesitated. Some said there was a man trapped upstairs, a projectionist. Others said it was Rains himself. No one ever found a body. "Do you have any records, articles?" The woman nodded slowly, disappearing into a back room. When she returned, she carried a small, water-stained folder marked 1953 Liberty Theater Incident. Clara opened it carefully. Inside were yellowed clippings, black-on, white photos, and an official fire report. The headline read, "Local producer vanishes after theater blaze. Police suspect foul play." Beneath it, a photograph of Rains, confident, handsome, smiling. The same face from the reel, the same watch on his wrist, the same faint glint of something dark in his eyes. But then she saw the next image, a charred corner of the projection booth, burned almost beyond recognition, and yet, behind the melted machinery, something metallic gleamed through the ash. A pattern, a circle, rays extending outward. The sunburst. Clara's stomach turned. Was this ever investigated? The volunteer shrugged, briefly. "The police closed it within a week, said the cause was faulty wiring. Rains was presumed dead, but there were rumors." "What kind of rumors?" The woman leaned closer, her voice dropping. "People said the fire wasn't an accident. Said it started when Rains tried to destroy something, or someone tried to destroy him." Clara's pulse quickened. Who? No one knows. But 2 days later, men in dark suits came through, took boxes from the ruins. No labels, no explanations. Then the theater was sealed for good. The town moved on. Her voice softened, eyes distant. "But not everyone forgets, not really." Clara thanked her and hurried out, rain soaking her coat before she reached the car. She drove back through puddled streets, mind spinning. The pieces were snapping together like shards of glass. Rains hadn't just hidden gold, he'd hidden evidence. Something someone wanted erased. The fire hadn't been his end, it had been his silence. When she reached the Liberty, the rain had slowed to a mist. The building stood quiet and damp, the marquee letters glistening like tears. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, the click echoing through the empty lobby. The smell of old film and smoke filled her lungs. In the booth, she spread out the fire photos beside Rain's ledger. Each image lined up perfectly with the sketches inside the blueprints of hidden vaults, chambers, passageways. The steel door she'd found wasn't just storage, it was the vault. She placed a trembling hand on the projector, the metal cold beneath her skin. The last entry in the ledger whispered through her memory, "They're coming for it. The light must never fall wrong." She turned toward the steel door. The faint outline of the sunburst symbol seemed to shimmer under the dim light, as though remembering the fire that had tried to erase it. Then a sound, soft, faint, a whisper, almost too quiet to be real. It came from behind the door. Clara stepped closer, holding her breath. The whisper grew clearer, the rasp of air through dust. It wasn't a voice she could understand, but it carried rhythm, cadence, almost like words replaying from an old reel. She pressed her ear against the cold steel. Light, truth, burn. She stumbled back, heart hammering, her hand flying to her mouth. The voice stopped. The projector, untouched, clicked once as if acknowledging what she'd just heard. She turned to face it, her breath shallow. "Jonathan," she whispered, "are you?" The bulb flared to life. A beam cut through the dark, projecting directly onto the opposite wall, not the screen, not the floor, but the bare plaster near the exit. There, in grainy black and white, a figure appeared. Jonathan Rains, his face half-shadowed, his mouth moving silently as the film jittered. The footage wasn't one she'd loaded, she hadn't even touched the machine. It was coming from nowhere. The lips moved again, faster now. A single word flickered in the subtitles, burned into the film's bottom edge. "Run." The image burned out in a flash of white, leaving Clara blind for a moment. When her vision returned, she was alone again, but the air had changed. The theater no longer felt dormant. It was awake, watching, and somewhere, beneath the cracked floors and walls, gold wasn't the only thing buried. Jonathan Rains hadn't died in that fire. He was still here, waiting for her to finish the story he'd started. As thunder rolled across the sky, Clara stood trembling in the projector's fading glow, realizing that what haunted the Liberty wasn't a ghost at all, it was unfinished truth. And truth, she now understood, doesn't rest in peace. The next morning broke in a sickly grey light, the kind that carried no warmth, only warning. The storm had passed, but the sky still hung heavy, thick with something that felt unfinished, like the air before another strike. Clara stood at the theater entrance, key trembling in her hand, watching her reflection in the glass. Her face looked older, sharper, different. The kind of change that happens when you start to see what was never meant to be seen. She turned the key and stepped inside. The Liberty was colder than usual, the kind of cold that felt intentional, as if the building had exhaled all warmth overnight. The scent of smoke and oil lingered faintly in the air, like a memory that refused to fade. The projector room loomed above her, dark and silent. The night before, it had shown her something impossible, a message from dead, a warning that defied logic. Run, but Clara wasn't running. She couldn't. She climbed the narrow stairway slowly, each step groaning beneath her weight. The booth door creaked open with its usual sigh, and the faint metallic smell met her like a greeting. The reel from last night still hung in the projector's teeth, though she hadn't loaded one. Her flashlight flicked on, the beam cutting through dust motes drifting like ash. The dawnlight ledger lay open on the table, the words "Shaw knows" underlined in streaks of smeared ink. Next to it, the fire photographs glimmered faintly where the storm's dim light slipped through the windows. Clara sat down on the stool, exhaling shakily. "All right, Jonathan," she whispered, "let's finish what you started." She pulled the fire report closer, studying the printed coordinates at the bottom, 41 degrees 36, 91 degrees 31, the location of the Liberty itself. But beneath it, handwritten in a faint scrawl, another set of numbers was circled, smaller, lighter, almost an afterthought. She copied them into her notebook, reading them aloud. 41 degrees 38, 91 degrees 29. The coordinates led somewhere northeast, close enough to drive. Her mind flickered back to Shaw's words. Rains wasn't alone. He was part of something. The realization settled heavy in her chest. If Rains hid the gold, maybe it wasn't all here. Maybe the Liberty was just one piece of a larger vault, a decoy or a map. She rose and began pacing, her shoes crunching on fragments of glass. The walls around her seemed to hum, the faint vibration traveling through her fingertips when she brushed the steel door. She crouched near it, tracing the engraved sunburst with her thumb. "Light must never fall wrong," she murmured. She shone the flashlight directly onto the symbol. The metal responded subtly but unmistakably. The sunburst glowed faintly again, and beneath it, the faintest outline of words appeared. To those who carry the dawn, beware its shadow. Her breath caught. Shadow. She whispered. The bulb in her flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed the booth. Her heart thudded in her throat. No, no. She hit the flashlight casing once, twice, but it stayed dead. Then, from the far side of the booth, the projector sparked to life. A flicker, a hum. The reel began to spin slowly, hesitantly, and light spilled across the cracked glass window, painting the wall with moving ghosts. Clara stepped closer, shielding her eyes. The image sharpened. The Liberty Theater, exactly as it looked now, but alive. Crowds filled the seats, dressed in suits and gowns. A banner hung across the stage. The golden premiere operation, Dawnlight. Her throat tightened. Oh my God. The film moved like a dream, soundless but vivid. She could almost smell the perfume, the popcorn, the buzz of electricity that came with a full house. Then the camera panned, and there he was. Jonathan Raines, standing at the podium, hands raised, smiling. At his guests, he began speaking, his mouth moving quickly. There were no subtitles, no audio, but Clara could feel his urgency. Something wasn't right. Behind him, a few men exchanged glances, stiff and nervous. Then a flash, the image distorted, screams, blurred shapes running. Smoke filled the frame, curling upward from the stage. The reel stuttered, burning at the edges. Clara stumbled back, covering her mouth as the film melted in real time, the acrid scent of scorched celluloid filling the booth. The projector sputtered, flickered, and then went black. For a few seconds, all she could hear was the hiss of the burning film, and then, beneath it, another sound. Footsteps, coming from the hall below. Clara froze. Her eyes darted toward the stairwell. The rhythm of the steps was slow, deliberate, unmistakably human. She grabbed the flashlight again, shaking it until it came to life. The beam wavered, catching only fragments of the stairwell below. "Hello," she called out, no answer. She moved to the top of the stairs, her voice sharper this time. "Who's there?" Still nothing. Then a single voice rose from the dark below, low, steady, familiar. "You shouldn't have played it." Her blood went cold. Leland Shaw stepped into view, his coat dripping rain onto the steps. His expression was calm, but his eyes gleamed with something feral behind them. "I told you some things were meant to stay buried." Clara gripped the railing. "How did you get in here?" He smiled faintly. "Doors are for people who need permission." She took a step back. "You saw the film, didn't you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the booth, his gaze settling on the ledger. "So, you've been busy." She glared. "You were there, Shaw, in 1953. You stood beside Raines." He tilted his head, the smirk fading into something colder. "Raines had vision," he said softly. "He wanted to preserve something that should have died in the fire. But vision without discipline burns everything around it." "What was Dawnlight?" Clara demanded. "Insurance," he replied. "A secret for a world that wasn't ready for truth." "Truth about what?" "About value," Shaw said, taking a slow step closer. Gold was the distraction. What mattered was what it funded: an experiment in power, light, and loyalty. The kind of truth men build governments to hide. Her pulse raced, and Raines tried to expose it. He smiled again, almost proudly. He filmed what he wasn't supposed to. The premiere wasn't a screening. It was a test. He thought he could control it. Control what? The light. The words sent a chill crawling through her spine. Raines called it Dawnlight. Shaw continued, his voice lowering. A device hidden in the projector's design, a way to harness energy, refract it into gold frequencies. It was supposed to create endless wealth. Instead, it created ghosts. Clara's breath hitched. "Ghosts," he nodded slowly. "You've seen them. The images that move when no reel is playing. The voices that speak without air. The Liberty was never haunted, Miss Reese. It's alive." Silence pressed thick between them. Clara's gaze flicked to the steel door. The humming had returned, soft, resonant, almost like breathing. Shaw followed her eyes and smiled knowingly. Rains sealed it for a reason, he said. He tried to bury the heart of dawnlight before it consumed everything. Clara shook her head, backing toward the door. And you want to open it? He shrugged. Want is the wrong word, need is closer. I'm not letting you touch it. He smiled, almost pitying. You don't have a choice. Lightning flashed outside, throwing white light across his face. For a split second, she saw something impossible. His reflection in the booth window didn't match his movements. It lagged, delayed, as if time itself hesitated around him. Shaw's eyes caught hers. You see it now, don't you? What the light does, what it takes to stay inside it. She felt her back hit the steel door, cold and solid. Her hand brushed the sunburst emblem, and the lines began to glow faintly again, reacting to her touch. Shaw took another step forward, lowering his voice. Open it, Clara. Let it finish what it started. She shook her head violently. No. Then it will open for you. Before she could react, the projector behind him roared to life again, blinding light flooding the booth. The reel spun wildly, unwound film whipping through the air. The entire room vibrated. The steel door behind her groaned, a deep metallic rumble like a vault awakening from sleep. Shaw's face flickered in the strobe of the projector beam, half real, half reflection. He raised his voice over the hum. Rains failed because he hesitated. Don't make his mistake. Clara screamed as the door flared with golden light, the symbol searing against her palm. The last thing she saw before everything went white was Shaw's faint smile, the same one captured in that decades-old photograph. Then darkness. When Clara opened her eyes, the light was gone. Projector was dead. The door was closed. Shaw had vanished. But something new lay at her feet, a single gold coin, warm to the touch, engraved with the same sunburst emblem, and etched along its edge, barely visible, were 4 chilling words. Light never dies, Clara. As the rain began again outside, she realized what she had awakened was no longer history, it was consequence. The Liberty was alive, and now, so was the secret. Dawn came muted and uncertain, filtered through low clouds that swallowed the sky. Clara hadn't slept. She sat in her car, parked across the street from the Liberty Theater, hands wrapped around a paper cup of cold coffee, staring at the building's dark silhouette. The marquee letters hung loose in the wind, clattering faintly, a sound that, in the emptiness of morning, felt almost alive. She could still feel the burn on her palm from where the sunburst symbol had seared her. The mark had faded overnight, but the ache remained, not pain exactly, more like the echo of heat. A whisper that refused to leave her skin. Inside her mind, the night replayed in fragments. Shaw's voice calm, steady, inhuman, saying, light never dies. The explosion of the projector's beam, the door's glow, the golden coin that appeared where he'd stood. She had turned it over again and again through the long hours before sunrise. The inscription, carved along its edge, was perfectly deliberate. Light never dies, Clara. He'd known she'd find it. He'd wanted her to. And though every instinct in her screamed to walk away, she couldn't. The Liberty had become something more than a place. It was a pulse, a presence. Every answer she needed was sealed behind that door, the one that had been waiting for 70 years. By mid-morning, she was inside again. The lobby was drenched in pale light, every corner sharp and cold. The silence pressed against her ears until even the soft scuff of her boots sounded invasive. She carried a crowbar, a flashlight, and her son's old Polaroid camera, tools of desperation. Of proof, when she climbed the stairs, the projector room greeted her like a confession chamber. Dust swirled in the sunlight, slanting through the cracked window, and the air felt charged, as if the building knew what she'd come to do. The smell of ozone lingered faintly, a memory of the light that had nearly consumed her. The gold coin sat exactly where she'd left it on the table. It caught the sunlight, gleaming with that uncanny warmth that didn't seem to fade. She reached for it, hesitated, then pocketed it. "If you want me to find it," she muttered, "then I'll find it on my terms." Her gaze drifted toward the steel door. The surface had dulled again, the sunburst symbol now faint, barely visible, but she could still feel it humming faintly when she got close, like a living thing just beneath the surface. Clara set down her bag, gripping the crowbar with both hands. Old bolts at the hinges were thick with rust. She wedged the metal between them, prying slowly, each groan of the steel echoing through the booth. Sweat rolled down her temple despite the chill. When the first bolt gave, it sounded like a gasp. She paused, breath shaking. "All right," she whispered to herself. No turning back. The second bolt snapped, then the third. As the last hinge gave way, a deep vibration rippled through the floor, subtle but real. The projector shuddered on its base, glass rattling in the frame. She stepped back, heart pounding. "It's just pressure," she told herself. "Just air trapped for decades." But when she placed her hand on the door again, the metal was warm, not from friction, from something deeper. The latch resisted once, then turned with a slow, grinding twist. The seal broke. A sigh not mechanical, but almost organic, drifted out, carrying with it a wave of cold air that smelled of stone, earth, and time. Clara lifted her flashlight, its beam slicing into the darkness beyond. A narrow staircase descended into the depths, walls of concrete slick with condensation. The air shimmered faintly, thick with particles that looked like dust, but glowed softly under the light. She hesitated at the threshold, the enormity of the moment pressing down on her. The air was heavy with something ancient, something that felt older than the theater itself. Behind her, the projector clicked once, then fell silent again. "Jonathan," she murmured, "what did you bury down here?" She stepped inside. The air was colder immediately, the temperature dropping with each stair. Her flashlight beam danced across the narrow corridor, revealing walls etched with faint symbols, sunbursts, circles, and strange alchemical markings she couldn't recognize. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage widened into a low-ceilinged chamber. The floor was covered in a layer of fine dust that glittered faintly in the beam like powdered gold. Crates lined the walls, old, rusted, their wood swollen with age. She knelt beside the nearest one. The markings on the side were faint, but still visible. U.S. Treasury Restricted. Her breath caught. She brushed the lid clean, running her fingers along the stenciled letters. The crate's metal clasps were fused shut, but a small portion had splintered open from age. She pried it gently until a corner gave way. The smell of oil and decay filled the air. Inside, wrapped in cracked canvas, something metallic gleamed. She reached in, her fingers trembling, and lifted it slightly. A gold bar, heavy, cold, real. Her heart hammered as she stared at it. Decades of myth, rumor, obsession, all of it was true. But as she turned the bar over, she froze. Stamped into the underside was not a mint mark, but an emblem, the same sunburst sigil. Beneath it, in small letters, Dawnlight. Clara's chest tightened. This wasn't treasure, this was manufactured. Her light moved across the room, catching more crates, dozens of them, all marked the same way. She staggered backward, the enormity of it crashing down. This was no simple theft. This was an operation, a vault of gold born, not of greed but of experiment. Something rustled behind her. She spun, flashlight jerking wildly across the chamber. Nothing. The silence pressed in again, thicker now. But then she noticed something on the far wall, a shape, faint and shifting, like a shadow that didn't belong. She approached it. Slowly, the beam steadied on it and her stomach twisted. It was a projection, a flicker of light forming from nowhere, dancing across the concrete, faint, unstable, but undeniably human, shaped. Jonathan Rains. He stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back, his expression calm, eyes glowing faintly with reflected light. His lips moved, and though no sound came, she understood the words, You weren't supposed to open it. Clara stumbled back, breath catching in her throat. You're not real, she whispered. The apparition tilted its head slightly, almost in pity. Then another flicker. The figure split, one image becoming two. Behind Rains, another shape appeared. Leland Shaw. They stood together, just as they had in the photographs, their faces caught between light and shadow. Clara took another step back, nearly tripping on a crate. No, she whispered, this isn't possible. The projection wavered, and for a moment the chamber walls seemed to glow, faint veins of gold pulsing like blood beneath the concrete. The air hummed, deep and rhythmic, as if the theater itself was responding. She clutched the gold bar tightly, backing toward the stairs. The light brightened. The figures moving closer, flickering faster, merging with the glow. Their voices overlapped now, distant but clear. Rains, you've unsealed what was never yours. Sure, but it always needed you to open it. The chamber trembled, dust falling from the ceiling in thin streams. Clara turned and bolted up the stairs, her flashlight jerking wildly. The hum rose into a low roar, like machinery coming alive after decades of silence. At the top, she stumbled into the projection booth, slamming the door shut behind her. Her chest heaved as she pressed her back against it, listening, but the sound below had stopped. Only silence now. She looked down at the gold bar still clutched in her hand. In the dim light, its surface shimmered, faintly pulsing, like it was breathing. Her reflection in the brass casing trembled as she whispered to herself, "What did I just wake up?" Outside, lightning split the sky. The Liberty's neon sign flickered for the first time in 70 years, sputtering weakly to life. The building had begun to breathe again, and deep beneath her feet, the vault of dawnlight stirred, waiting for its true light to fall once more. The Liberty was no longer silent. Even when Clara stood perfectly still, she could hear it, a deep, low hum, pulsing through the floors like the sound of a far-off generator buried beneath the earth. Every beam, every inch of plaster, seemed to vibrate faintly with it, as if the theater had a heartbeat again. She stood in the projection booth, drenched in sweat despite the cold, the gold bar heavy in her trembling hands. Its surface still shimmered faintly, alive with a warmth that didn't belong to metal. Each pulse of light moved in time with that hum below. Her breath came short, fogging the air. "You're not supposed to be alive," she whispered. "You're not supposed to be anything." But the bar didn't cool. If anything, it pulsed brighter. Clara stumbled toward the work table, setting it down beside the ledger. The golden light reflected in the pages, dancing across the frantic handwriting of Jonathan Rains. She flipped to the last filled page, reading again the words that now seemed to speak directly to her. "It cannot be contained. The light remembers what it touches." Her throat tightened. The meaning was beginning to take shape. The gold wasn't just hidden wealth. It was charged, altered, perhaps even alive. She turned the page. There was one more note, faint, almost erased. "If the seal breaks, close the circuit. Do not let the reflection reach the screen." "The reflection," she murmured, staring at the words. "What does that mean?" Her eyes darted toward the booth's window, the torn movie screen below, pale in the dim light. The projector sat dead, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that if she so much as looked through the lens, she would see something staring back. She shoved the ledger away, its brittle pages tearing slightly, and gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles whitened. Her heart wouldn't slow down. She couldn't stay up here, not alone. The air in the booth had grown stifling, metallic, filled with the faint scent of ozone and burning wire. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, flashlight trembling in her hand. The sound below had changed, no longer a hum, but something deeper, breathing in uneven waves. Clara descended the stairs. Each step felt longer than the last, as if gravity were pulling at her feet. The darkness below seemed denser now, like water instead of air. She reached the bottom, the beam of her flashlight cutting across the auditorium's decaying seats. Dust swirled in faint spirals, catching some unseen current. Then she heard it again, the whisper, soft, rhythmic, almost human. She turned toward the stage. The curtain moved slightly, as the Stirred by breath, the beam of her flashlight trembled over it, revealing handprints in the dust along the fabric fresh. Her pulse quickened. Who's there? No answer. She stepped closer, her shoes crunching on glass. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of half-formed words echoing through the hollow space. As she reached the stage, the flashlight flickered, once, twice, then died. Darkness fell heavy and absolute. Clara froze, the world narrowing. To sound the rain outside, the faint vibration of the floorboards, and the whispering that now surrounded her from every direction. She groped for the curtain, pushing it aside, her fingers brushing cold fabric. The smell of dust and decay filled her nose. Beyond the curtain, the air was different, colder, denser. Then, faintly, a light bloomed in the distance. It came from the open stairwell she'd left behind the steel door, that impossible passage she had just escaped. The glow was gold, flickering like candlelight, but alive in a way flame never could be. No, she whispered. No, I closed it. But the door stood open again. She should have run. Every rational instinct told her to flee, yet something deeper, something heavier, held her in place. A pull magnetic, ancient, inescapable. Clara descended the hidden stairs once more. The chamber below was no longer quiet. The hum had grown into a chorus, the gold dust rising like embers from invisible fire. The crates glowed faintly from within, light leaking through cracks in their seams. The air shimmered with heat, and in the center of the room, where there had once been only stone, now stood a single shape, the faint projection of Jonathan Rains, clearer than before. He looked younger now, less spectral. His suit was immaculate, his eyes steady. When he spoke, she heard him this time. The sound came not from his mouth, but from everywhere at once. "You've awakened it." Clara swallowed, her voice breaking. "What is it, Jonathan? What did you build?" He stepped closer, the edges of his body flickering with light. Not a machine, not gold. Dawnlight was meant to preserve consciousness, the reflection of self through light. It was never treasure, it was containment. Her stomach dropped. "You trapped something here." Rains nodded once. "We trapped them, the men who tried to weaponize it. Their greed anchored them in the medium. Now the light holds their memory, their will." Clara shook her head, backing away. "That's impossible." His voice lowered. "Every projection needs a source. You became it when you broke the seal." The air trembled around her. Shadows twisted against the walls, forming faint outlines, faces, hands, bodies frozen mid-motion. They flickered like damaged film, struggling to hold shape. Rain's expression softened with pity. It needed a new host. The realization hit like cold steel. The glow wasn't coming from the gold anymore. It was coming from her. Her skin reflected it faintly, veins illuminated beneath the surface like threads of molten light. She gasped, clutching her arms. "No, no, you're lying." Rain's form flickered, his voice straining. "Close the circuit, Clara, before the reflection reaches the screen." The screen, his gaze lifted past her to the stairwell. "It's climbing. Once it reaches the surface, there will be no stopping it." A distant creak echoed above the groan of the projector starting on its own. Clara spun, racing up the stairs, her flashlight clattering behind her. The hum rose into a shriek, vibrating through her bones. As she reached the projection booth, the air was blinding, the projector bursting to life, its beam already aimed at the torn screen below. She lunged for the power switch. Sparks burst as she yanked it, burning her hand. The beam flickered, dimmed but didn't die. Light poured through the booth window, golden and alive, crawling down the walls like water. Shapes moved inside it. Faces, hundreds of them, whispering in a single, terrible voice. Clara screamed, slamming her palm against the lens. The light recoiled, hissing like steam, but it didn't fade. It wrapped around her arm, searing the skin, merging with the faint glow that already pulsed beneath her veins. Her vision blurred, the air shimmered, bending around her. And then, from deep within the light, she saw them, Rains and Shaw, side by side, their faces stretched thin by the glow. Rains ended. Shaw, Let it finish. The voices collided in her skull. She stumbled backward, crashing into the wall, tears streaking her face. Stop. She screamed, and the light obeyed. It burst outward, exploding through the booth window in a shower of dust and glass, flooding the theater below. Then silence. The beam vanished. The hum ceased.